percentage of cases.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Doug, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you'd like to use it.
Well, just very simply, yes, we've increased the number of gang injunction, arrests, and prosecutions 760%. At the same time, violent crime in Long Beach has dropped to the lowest record in 41 years. I'm proud of that, and the FBI says that about half of all violent crimes across the nation are gang-related. So I do know that our dramatic increase in our gang prevention strategy is helping to reduce the number of violent crimes in Long Beach. And I'm very proud of that, and I want to continue that, which is why I'm running for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosemary, you have 1 minute if you'd like to respond to that.
Thank you. If we wanted to do something bold to stop gang activity, then we all should consider legalizing marijuana and getting behind the Democratic platform and the ACLU and taking the profit motive out of gangs and eliminating their ability to be involved in these other criminal enterprises. The Rand Corporation says that we would reduce crime if marijuana were legalized. Now, that's not something the city prosecutor's office can do, but it's certainly a way to attack the gang activity where it would really hurt.
Okay. And that will lead directly into our second question. And that is the question of medical marijuana has been a very controversial one in the city. The situation right now is that medical marijuana cooperatives are under city code not allowed. And yet I'm not real sure what the city prosecutor's role in the current situation is, and or what you see the role in the future. Rosemary, would you like to start?
Yes, well, I believe that everyone should have safe and easy access to medical marijuana. There are just so many conditions that can be addressed and treated by the use of marijuana that is less expensive than pharmaceutical drugs and does less damage to a person's system. Currently, in the city of Long Beach, there are no legal dispensaries, but the impact on the prosecutor's office is that there are still people who drive under the influence, and whether you have a prescription for Xanax or Valium or marijuana, you're not supposed to be driving if it's impairing you. But as long as marijuana is illegal, we can't train our police officers to really detect when folks are driving and impaired by marijuana, because police officers can't study people who are using marijuana. In fact, our government paid for a study in Amsterdam so that they could observe how people react and respond behind the wheel while they're under the influence of marijuana. And those are the links that our law enforcement folks have to go to in order to be able to articulate and to observe when people are influenced in driving impaired under marijuana. But I do believe that medical marijuana should be available. I have someone in my close family who happens to have fibromyalgia, and her pain is so great that she can't get a decent night's sleep. And the only thing that really gives her relief is medical marijuana. So I would think that the city should embrace it. It's the will of the people of the state of California, and it's not something that the city should defeat.
Thank you. Doug, same question.
Well, I was listening carefully for the answer to the question, what is the role of the city prosecutor's office? And I'm going to try to start with that part. I think there's two roles. The first is to enforce the law, because the city prosecutor's office is to enforce the law. The law is not necessarily passed by the city prosecutor, but needs to be enforced by the city prosecutor. The second role, I think, in Long Beach is to help the policymakers make good decisions. Prior to my election in 2010, there was a different city attorney and a different city prosecutor in office, and they didn't agree on the right approach to medical marijuana. There was a dispute, and I believe at one time one said that they weren't going to support the other on the enforcement of it, and I think the city did not benefit from having the city attorney's office and the city prosecutor's office on the same page. I think there's a much better approach is going to be to address the problems, the holes in state law and the holes in federal law, and try to ensure that if an ordinance is passed by the city council, and there's a fairly good chance that the council will do that in the next year, that it's a practical ordinance, that it's a reasonable ordinance, that it's a fair ordinance, and that it can be enforced in a way that everyone who has a medical need can get that medical need addressed without creating the problems that we've had for the last 3 years with litigation. Just the other day, I read in the Press Telegram a new bill, SB 1262, which talks about a statewide approach to the medical marijuana problem. What's been lacking, I've seen, is a statewide and federal approach to medical marijuana, and cities that go off on their own and do their own ordinances run the risk, as Long Beach and other cities have done, that they get it wrong and they spend a lot of time and money. I would like to see a greater approach, and I think the city prosecutor's office could be involved on a federal and state approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rosemary, you have 1 minute.
Well, the problem about drafting a proper medical marijuana ordinance for the city is the problem of the city attorney. However, enforcement of the law, of the criminal law, is the responsibility of the city prosecutor. I think that medical marijuana should be available. The people of California have already stated their opinion on that. But I also think that people who have that prescription have to be advised very thoroughly that they are not supposed to be driving when that marijuana is operating in their system. And that should be the public safety concern of the city prosecutor.
Doug, you have a minute if you want.
Well, just very shortly, this Long Beach City Charter does provide that the city prosecutor's office drafts penal ordinances. Those are ordinances that have penal consequences, and so this is an area where the city prosecutor's office and the city attorney's office need to talk and be on the same page, in my opinion. So, and I am doing that. Whoever the next city attorney is, if it's not the current one, I will work with that office and do everything I possibly can to make sure that good public policy is adopted and followed in Long Beach.
Okay. Before we go to the next question, does anyone have proposed questions for the city prosecutor? If so, raise your card and Julie will take care of you.
An important function of the city prosecutor's office is code enforcement because of affordable housing implications, homeless, etc. How do you see the way you've been handling code enforcement in the city?
Well, my background, when I was in the city prosecutor's office the first time, I did handle a lot of the high-profile code enforcement cases. We put slumlords in jail. In fact, one of them was an attorney who didn't keep up his property, and he was sentenced to jail. The most serious cases need to have the threat of prosecution. The vast majority of code enforcement cases are solved short of criminal prosecution. And it's important because criminal prosecution it is a very powerful device, but it's a blunt device. And I think the city's use of administrative citations is working for the most part. It's only on the most egregious, most serious cases that the city prosecutor's office needs to get involved in. There's a Press Telegram editorial from 2011 which talks about my work prosecuting some of the most vicious slumlords who are really taking money out of their property in Long Beach and not putting anything back into them. It's important that the city prosecutor's office sets the right tone and sends the right message to those who are here to create blight and to take profits and are not here to improve our community. I've done that for many years. In fact, I've been a speaker at the Statewide Code Enforcement Officers Association, a featured speaker, and this is what I've done for a number of communities, and I do it very effectively here in Long Beach. If I have 1 second, just to give one example, and the press picked up on this case. When I was in office about 1 year into it, a woman took over a warehouse and started converting it into apartment lofts to rent to people. And we immediately stopped it. We filed a 25-count misdemeanor complaint, and within a week, it had been converted back. And that kind of quick action, I think, will help prevent blight in the future.
Thank you. Rosemary, same question.
Well, I haven't done code enforcement cases in my past career, but this is one of those instances where I would put into place my philosophy that a misdemeanor prosecutor is a social worker with a hammer. So you have to be very clear that you will take seriously people who will not change their ways and will not clean up their act or their property. However, there are so many different issues that come out of this problem. We have to think about court enforcement in a broader sense, because there are people who are hoarders. There are people who become disabled and they can't keep up their property. You can't automatically go in there and start threatening those folks with criminal prosecution. Also, this is another kind of charge that goes hand in hand with the city attorney's office. They do a lot of the initial code enforcement contact. So it's not so simple as putting people in jail and prosecuting them. But another way to ensure that there aren't problems like broken windows on a block or people trespassing is to make sure that kids are in school. And even under Doug's current policies, Long Beach still has some of the highest truancy rates in the state. There was a published report just in July of last year that Long Beach Unified School District had a 43% truancy rate, where the rest of the state was, the rest of the county was at about 28%. And that's just appalling. And one school in particular, Cabrillo High School up at the north end of town, could have a truancy rate as high as 75%. What are those kids doing during the day? If there are vacant property, if there are empty homes, you know that they're going to be attractive to those youngsters. So it is a much broader issue than just hauling people into jail.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you.